A crown won by ambition is rarely worn in peace. In our last episode, we saw how a wealthy Etruscan exile, Lucius Tarquinius Priscus, manipulated his way onto the Roman throne. But the gods, it seemed, had already chosen his successor. A young boy named Servius Tullius, raised in the royal household, had been marked by a terrifying miracle. As he slept, his head burst into a blaze of divine fire. Queen Tanaquil, recognizing the celestial omen, decreed that the boy was destined to be a light in their adversity and raised him as their own. But human resentment does not yield easily to divine will. The sons of King Ancus Marcius had long simmered in their anger. For 38 years, they had watched the foreigner Tarquin rule, considering it the highest in dignity that they had been deprived of their father's crown by a guardian's treachery. Now they faced an even greater insult. The throne was poised to descend to Servius Tullius, a man they viewed as the son of a slave. In this final episode of our journey through Rome's early monarchy, we will witness how the violent ambition of a few individuals destroyed the lives of many. We will explore the sweeping reforms of a brilliant king, the horrific betrayal on the wicked street, and the ultimate tragedy that finally drove the Romans to cast off their kings forever.
Chapter 1. The First Assassination and the Queen's Deception. Determined to prevent a slave-born succession, the sons of Uncus laid a deadly plot against King Tarquin himself. They selected two of the most ferocious shepherds they could find to execute the deed. These assassins approached the royal palace wielding the rustic implements of their trade and staged a violent, noisy quarrel in the porch to draw the attention of the king's guards. When their clamor reached the interior of the palace, both men were called in before the king. As Tarquin turned his full attention to the first shepherd who was stating his case, the second raised his axe and struck it deep into the king's head. Leaving the weapon lodged in the wound, the assassins rushed out of the house. As the lictors seized the fleeing men, panic erupted in the palace. But Queen Tanaquil remained terrifyingly calm. She ordered the palace doors shut and thrust out all bystanders. She then summoned Servius Tullius, showed him his dying father-in-law, and grasped his right hand. "Servius," she implored, "if you are a man, the kingdom is yours. Now let that celestial flame arouse you." Tanaquil then stepped to a window facing the new street and addressed the bewildered populace. She calmly lied to the citizens of Rome, assuring them that the king was merely stunned by a sudden blow, that the wound was not deep, and that he had commanded the people to obey the orders of Servius Tullius in the meantime. For several days, Tarquin's death was kept a strict secret. Under the pretense of discharging the duties of an ailing king, Servius strengthened his own political interest. By the time the king's death was finally announced and the palace filled with lamentations, Servius had secured the kingdom with a strong guard and the Senate's consent, making him the first Roman king to take the throne without the people's direct orders. Chapter 2. The Architect of the Republic. Though he ruled as a king, Servius Tullius laid the very foundations of the Roman Republic. He realized that a state could not indefinitely manage its military and financial burdens if they were borne promiscuously by all citizens, regardless of their means. He instituted the census, an incredibly profound reform that shifted the basis of political and military power from birthright to wealth. Servius divided the population into classes and centuries. Those possessing an estate of 100,000 asses or more were placed in the first class, comprising 80 centuries. They were required to equip themselves with a bronze helmet, a round shield, greaves, and a coat of mail, alongside a spear and a sword. As the property qualifications decreased through the second, third, and fourth classes, so did the armor requirements. The fifth class, rated at only 11,000 asses, was armed merely with slings and stones. All those with property lower than this were exempted from military service entirely. While this system laid the financial burden of the state heavily upon the rich, it also transferred the ultimate political power into their hands. The knights and the first class were called to vote first. If they agreed, the matter was settled without ever asking the lower classes. Upon completing the first census, Servius performed a great purification sacrifice in the Campus Martius. The count revealed 80,000 citizens capable of bearing arms. To accommodate this immense population, Servius expanded the city, adding the Quirinal and Viminal hills and enlarging the Esquiline. He surrounded Rome with a rampart, a moat, and a stone wall, extending the sacred boundary of the city known as the Pomerium. Through statesmanship, he also persuaded the Latin states to build a temple to Diana at Rome, an act which silently acknowledged Rome as the capital of both nations. Chapter 3. The Wicked Street. Servius Tullius reigned with mildness and moderation for 44 years, but the inevitable decrees of fate could not be broken. To prevent the family of Tarquin from resenting his rule, Servius had married his 2 daughters to the 2 grandsons of Tarquinius Priscus, Lucius, and Arruns. The marriages were a fatal mismatch. The haughty, fiercely ambitious Tullia the Younger was married to the mild-mannered Arruns, while her gentle sister was married to the fiery, arrogant Lucius Tarquin. Tullia despised her husband's lack of ambition. She began to hold secret conversations with Lucius, manipulating his pride, telling him he was the only one worthy of the throne. Bound by their shared wickedness, the two initiated a horrific sequence of events. Through immediate, successive deaths, they made their houses vacant for new nuptials, murdering their respective spouses and marrying each other. Tullia gave her new husband no rest. She spurred him on daily, demanding he seize his father's kingdom. Driven by her frenzied instigations, Lucius Tarquin gathered a band of armed men, rushed into the forum, and seated himself upon the king's throne before the Senate House. He summoned the senators and began delivering a vitriolic speech against Servius, mocking him as a slave who favored the degraded classes. When the elderly King Servius arrived at the Senate House and demanded to know by what audacity Tarquin sat upon his throne, a violent struggle ensued. Tarquin, younger and far stronger, seized the old king by the middle and hurled him down the stone steps of the Senate House to the bottom. As Servius, bleeding and almost lifeless, attempted to flee home with his terrified retinue, he was overtaken and slaughtered in the street by assassins sent by Tarquin. What followed is one of the most revolting crimes in Roman history. Tullia, unabashed by the crowd, drove her chariot into the forum and was the first to hail her husband as king. As she returned home, her driver suddenly stopped and drew in the reins in terror, pointing to the murdered, bleeding body of Servius lying in the road. Frantic and urged on by the furies of her ambition, Tullia ordered her driver forward, driving her chariot directly over her father's mangled corpse. The street where this unnatural horror occurred was forever after known as the Vicus Sceleratus, the Wicked Street. Chapter 4. The Reign of Terror. Lucius Tarquinius, now known to history as Tarquin the Proud, began his reign by refusing his father-in-law a proper burial. Aware that his claim to the throne rested solely on force, he surrounded himself with armed guards. He ruled without the sanction of the people or the Senate. To secure his kingdom by terror, he took sole cognizance of capital cases, using the power to execute, banish, or fine anyone he suspected, hated, or simply wished to plunder. He murdered the principal senators and refused to replace them, deliberately making the Senate a weak and contemptible body. Tarquin was a tyrant, but he was also a highly capable general. When he failed to take the neighboring city of Gabii by siege, he resorted to a distinctly un-Roman strategy of deceit. He sent his youngest son, Sextus Tarquin, to Gabii, where the young man pretended to be a refugee fleeing his father's unnatural cruelty. The Gabians, deceived by his lies, welcomed him and eventually made him their general. Sextus sent a messenger to Rome to ask his father how he should proceed. Tarquin the Proud, walking in his garden, gave no verbal answer. Instead, he silently used his staff to strike off the heads of the tallest poppies. Understanding this grim pantomime, Sextus immediately put to death or banished the most eminent men of Gabii, delivering the leaderless city into his father's hands without a struggle. With the spoils of his wars, Tarquin employed the Roman people in grueling manual labor to construct the massive temple of Jupiter on the Tarpeian Mount. During the excavation, a human head with the face entire was uncovered, a terrifying prodigy that soothsayers declared meant Rome would be the head of the world. He also forced the citizens to dig the Cloaca Maxima, the great subterranean sewer to carry away the filth of the city, a work of such immense scale that even modern splendor can scarcely equal it.
Chapter 5. The Oracle and the Fool. Amidst this tyranny, the king was shaken by a frightful omen in his own palace. A serpent slid out of a wooden pillar, filling Tarquin with anxious solicitude. Terrified by this domestic apparition, he decided to send his 2 sons to the oracle at Delphi in Greece. As a companion for the princes, Tarquin sent his own nephew, Lucius Junius Brutus. Brutus was a man of profound intellect, but upon seeing the principal men of the city, including his own brother, murdered by his uncle, he resolved to survive by appearing completely harmless. He feigned idiocy, submitting to the mockery of the court and embracing the surname Brutus, which meant the dullard or the fool. When they traveled to Delphi, the princes treated Brutus as a subject of sport. Yet Brutus secretly offered Apollo a golden rod, enclosed within a hollowed staff of cornel wood, a mystical emblem of his own brilliant mind, hidden within a dull exterior. After the princes executed their father's commission, they asked the oracle which of them would inherit the sovereignty of Rome. A voice echoed from the bottom of the cave. "Young men, whichever of you shall first kiss his mother shall enjoy the sovereign power at Rome." The princes agreed to keep this a secret and cast lots to decide who would kiss their mother upon returning. But Brutus understood the true meaning of the Pythian response. Pretending to stumble, he fell and pressed his lips to the ground, the earth, the common mother of all mankind. Chapter 6. The Tragedy of Lucretia. The spark that would finally ignite the Roman Revolution occurred during a military campaign against the wealthy Rutulan city of Ardea. Because the siege was tedious, the royal princes often spent their leisure hours feasting. One evening, in the tent of Sextus Tarquin, a heated debate arose among the men concerning the virtue of their wives. Collatinus, a nobleman of the royal bloodline, insisted his wife Lucretia excelled all others and challenged the men to ride back to their homes unannounced to see how the women behaved in their absence. They galloped to Rome and found the king's daughters-in-law enjoying a luxurious banquet. But when they rode to Collatia late at night, they found Lucretia sitting in the middle of her house, spinning wool by lamplight alongside her maids. The victory was unanimously awarded to Lucretia. but the sight of her beauty and her approved purity awakened a villainous, uncontrollable passion in the heart of Sextus Tarquin. A few days later, without her husband's knowledge, Sextus returned to Calatia. He was received as a guest and given a chamber. In the dead of night, burning with passion, he entered Lucretia's room with a naked sword. He pressed his left hand down upon her breast and whispered, "Be silent, Lucretia. I am Sextus Tarquin. I have a sword in my hand. You shall die if you utter a word." He begged, threatened, and pleaded, but Lucretia remained inflexible, unmoved even by the terror of death. Seeing her unyielding chastity, Sextus added the ultimate threat of dishonor. He told her he would murder a slave, strip him naked, and place him beside her dead body, telling the world she had been killed in the act of infamous adultery. By the sheer terror of this absolute disgrace, Sextus overcame her and departed exulting in his triumph over a lady's honor. Chapter 7. The Dawn of the Republic. In melancholy distress, Lucretia sent urgent messages to her father in Rome and her husband in Ardea, begging them to come quickly, each with one trusty friend. Her father arrived with Publius Valerius, and her husband Collatinus arrived accompanied by the supposed fool Lucius Junius Brutus. They found Lucretia sitting in her chamber, overwhelmed with sorrow. When her husband asked if all was well, tears burst from her eyes. "By no means," she replied, "for what can be right with a woman who has lost her honor? The body only has been violated. The mind is guiltless. Death shall be my witness." She named Sextus Tarquin as her attacker, demanding they pledge their honor that the adulterer would not go unpunished. The men pledged their word, trying to console her, arguing that where intention was wanting, guilt could not exist. But Lucretia answered, "It is for you to see what is due to him. As for me, though I acquit myself of guilt, from punishment I do not discharge myself, nor shall any woman survive her dishonor pleading the example of Lucretia." She drew a knife concealed beneath her garment, plunged it deep into her heart, and fell forward, expiring. As her father and husband shrieked in horror, Brutus stepped forward. He drew the bloody knife from Lucretia's chest. Holding it up, reeking with blood, he cast aside the mask of foolishness forever. "By this blood, most pure before the pollution of royal villainy, I swear," Brutus proclaimed, "and I call you, O gods, to witness my oath, that I shall pursue Lucius Tarquin the Proud, his wicked wife, and all their race, with fire, sword, and all other means in my power, nor shall I ever suffer them or any other to reign at Rome." Brutus handed the knife to the others, who, struck by the sudden revelation of his true mind, took the oath. They carried Lucretia's body into the Forum, where the sight of her corpse and the impassioned speeches of Brutus incited the youth of Calatia and Rome to take up arms. Brutus led the armed multitude into the Capitol, recounting the violation of Lucretia, the unnatural murder of Servius Tullius, and the reduction of Roman warriors to mere laborers. The people, incensed to a breaking point, passed an act of banishment against Tarquin, his wife, and his children. When Tarquin rushed back to Rome to quell the revolution, he found the city gates bolted against him. After 244 years, the Roman monarchy was finished. Liberty had come. 2 consuls were elected to lead the new state: Lucius Tarquinius Collatinus, the grieving husband, and Lucius Junius Brutus, the brilliant liberator. The Roman Republic was born.